Okay, test 1 should be visible to you now. You can take test 1 at any time up until the end of the course. In fact, you can make 2 attempts at it. Each time when you open it, you will have 1 hour to complete it. The practice test that has been available to you up to now has just been in the form of a PDF file, which is the way I administered the test back when I was teaching this class live in person. So what I have done now is I have created an online version of the test, and I want to walk you through that just so you can get used to the online format for this test and so that I can emphasize some important things about the test and its correct answers. So to get to the online practice test, you should just go to Modules, scroll down, and then you should see Practice Test 1. So you'll get a screen like this, and in this case it says no time limit and no due date because this is just the practice test. So you begin. All right. So for the first 2 questions on the test, I ask you about terms. And the 2 terms I'm asking you about are validity and argument. And these are actually 2 of the most central ideas in the course. So I want you to be able to understand them several different ways and to demonstrate your understanding of them several different ways. Both explaining a lexical definition, like the technical definition that's given in the glossary of the book, being able to explain it more informally, being able to recognize examples, all of that. So for argument here, I'm doing argument as a short answer question. So for the short answer question, the easiest thing you can do is just give the glossary definition of the back of the book, at the back of the book. An argument is a connected series of statements designed to convince an audience of another statement. Right? So that is the precise definition that we're using in this book. You can give less precise definitions, or you don't have to be word for what I'm saying, as long as you get a couple key ideas in. So you could say an argument is an attempt to persuade someone using statements called premises. So the 2 main features that I want any definition of argument to have is the idea that an argument is a form of persuasion and that it is composed of statements. All right. So for the next one, what is the definition of validity in logic and critical thinking? And for this one, on the practice test, I've given it to you as a simple multiple choice question. So what you want to say is that an argument is valid if it is impossible for the premises to be true and the conclusion false. Right. Questions 3 through 5 all have the same instructions. So I have put those instructions over here, right? And you need to follow these closely. The biggest reason people lose points on questions 3 through 5, either in the online version of the test or in person, is that they don't follow the instructions. So for these questions, I want you to identify a passage as an argument, an explanation, or neither. And then if it is an argument, you need to put it in standard form. If it is an explanation, you need to put it in standard form for explanations. And if it is neither, you need to explain why it's not an argument. Okay, so the first example, there are 3 familiar states of matter: solid, liquid, gas. Solid objects, they maintain their shape and volume regardless of location, etc., etc. And so this is happening in a chemistry textbook, and it looks like it's just giving you the definition of 3 terms. So so this one is not an argument or an explanation. There's no reasoning going on here at all. It's an expository passage. Giving 3 definitions. All right. Next up. Oh, and this is another thing that's annoying about the online format. So since these 3 questions are lumped together with these instructions, you need to scroll down here on this scroll bar, and then those instructions stay in place. Okay. Susan is discussing politics with Steve at the office. Look, a basic principle of fairness says that people who make more sacrifices should get more benefits. Therefore, nuclear power plants violate basic fairness because people who live near the power plants take on greater risks but do not receive greater benefits. So the 2 words should leap out at you here. Therefore and because. Those are your indicator words. This is an argument. So when you're filling this out on the test, you need to say, this is an argument, right? Then you need to put it in standard form. And the first thing you want to do is identify the conclusion. Nuclear power violates basic fairness. So we're going to scroll down here. C colon there. And then we're going to have 2 premises. I'm copying and pasting here, and that is fine. As long as I'm getting complete sentences that capture the original meaning, you can do it however you want. The basic principle of fairness says that people who take up more risks should get more benefits. P1. Right? And if I had to write this out by hand, I might paraphrase, but since it's on the computer, I can cut and paste. That makes it quicker. And then P2, people who live near nuclear power plants take on greater risks but do not receive greater benefits. Copy. Paste. And there you go. Lastly, you need to put in the indicator words. And this one has 2, because, and therefore. So this passage was conclusion middle. That's an awkward way to write, but often people do it, especially in speech, or like casual speech. The last one, again, you have to use this inner slider to get that to go down. Biology teacher outlines a common theory to her class. And then they explains that giraffes have long necks because it enables them to eat leaves higher up on trees. So this is an explanation. This is an explanation because it contains reasoning. It contains that magic word because, right, which indicates that reasoning is going on. But it's not an argument because the thing that we're talking about is something that we already know. It's not like nuclear power where there's a difference of opinion. Everyone knows, everyone agrees that giraffes have long necks. So we can say, explanation, everyone knows giraffes have long necks. Then you need to put it in standard form for an explanation, and here you can just number things. And I'm going to paraphrase. Giraffes with short necks couldn't reach high leaves. Giraffes with short necks left fewer offspring. And then finally 3, giraffes have long necks. They're actually all a full diagram of the logic of evolutionary arguments is actually quite complicated, but this is enough for now. What you've got are 2 statements that are explainers and 1 statement that is an explainee. And the thing that's significant here is that the explainee is not a conclusion because it's something we already know. We know giraffes have long necks. And then we can still put in an indicator word because. All right, I want to take a brief moment here to give you something a bit more entertaining, I think, than a logic test. Turns out giraffes do not have long necks in order to reach high vegetation. It's actually a product of sexual selection. Giraffes have long necks for the same reason deer have antlers, so that they can fight over mates. Check this out.
Ooh. Ooh.
Okay, back to logic. The next set works the same way as the previous one. So for questions 6 and 7, you have to decide whether it's deductive or inductive. And again, the questions are linked to the instructions, so you use this inside slider. Number 6 is a question about math. So this is deductive. Math is deductive. Is one easy answer. Another answer is that they're reasoning with attempting for validity, or maybe you could even say the argument is deductively valid. All of these would be acceptable. So when you put it in standard form, you're going to say the conclusion is the answer has to be 5. And then you've got a premise, and we'll just give the 2 statements as written, because that's going to be the easiest way to do this. Okay. The problem says blank plus 7 equals 12, P2. If a number added to 7 equals 12, then subtracting it 7 should give me that number. Conclusion, the answer is 5. And our indicator word is so. I can't emphasize enough here that you need to do all 3 parts of the answer. You need to tell me that this is deductive and why it's deductive. You need to write the argument in standard form, and then you need to write the indicator words. The next one is about Ernest Rutherford discovering the structure of an atom. And this is empirical science. It's not about pure math and numbers. It's about the physical world, and so the reasoning is going to be inductive. Empirical science is inductive. Okay. So, and the conclusion here is that positive charges are not evenly distributed across the atom. Whenever you're dealing with argument, it really helps to go conclusion first, because the conclusion structures everything else. Positive charges are not evenly distributed throughout the atom. And Geiger and Marsden, when I asked them to shoot these alpha particles, they found that a small number of them were deflected at a wide angle. Let's just do it like this. Okay. We're going to say that this is a premise. And then the best explanation for the phenomenon is that charge is not evenly distributed. And so that's going to be P2. All right. This one actually has a premise, the conclusion first and last. The negatively charged atoms form a shell around the positively charged nucleus, and the best explanation, and positive charges are not evenly distributed across the atom. Those are both basically statements of the conclusion. And so I'm paring that down to rather than write the conclusion twice, I just used the final statement of it here. Positive charges are not evenly distributed in the atom. And you could say that the best explanation of this is an indicator phrase, or you can just say no indicator phrases. There's nothing in here that's a strict synonym for because or therefore. All right. Last three questions are about the additional concepts from chapter 3. And I have formatted these simply as short answer questions because it's the way they're formatted in the test. It's awkward to translate them online into the kinds of multiple choice questions that Canvas allows me to ask. So I'm just going to do it like this. And what you're going to do is just write your answers in this blank. So for number 8, you have to identify each statement as a tautology, a contradiction, or a contingent sentence. So you're going to say statement A. Statement A is cannibalistic humanoid mutants live in sewers of New York. This was the premise for an 80s horror movie. But that's not the point. The point is that it is a false statement that we can imagine being true. It seems to be able to go either way, so we're going to call this a contingent statement. B, my house is shaped like a circle with 4 corners. A circle cannot have 4 corners. This is a contradiction. If Bob is a bachelor, he is unmarried. That's a tautology, right? Because bachelors, by definition, are unmarried. If Kermit the Frog is an amphibian, he spends part of his life cycle in water. That is a tautology. An amphibian is defined as an animal that spends part of its life cycle in water. Okay, and then E, most cars run on gasoline. This is a contingent statement. It happens to be true now, but it could be false if electric cars become more popular. Okay. Number 9, it deals with pairs of statements. You just need to look at each pair and decide whether they are equivalent, contradictory, or neither. So A, all students who study will pass the test, and if Jeremy studies, he will pass the test. This one's a little bit tricky. You might think these are equivalent because the first statement implies the second. However, the second statement does not imply the first. And when things are logically equivalent, they both imply each other. They say the exact same thing. So for A, we're going to say neither. Okay. B, Brian is sitting to the left of Kathy. Kathy is sitting to the left of Brian. And if they're sitting in a row and not on top of each other, these statements are contradictory. If one is true, the other has to be false, and vice versa. C, elephants are friendly social animals. Elephants greet each other by intertwining their trunks. These two statements are not equivalent, but they're not contradictory either. They're both true. So that's neither. D, elephants are friendly social animals. Members of the 2 surviving species of the family Elephantidae are friendly social animals. So these two statements are equivalent because the term elephant is equivalent to the statement the term members of the two surviving species of the family Elephantidae. And you probably didn't know that, but you could figure out from the context that that's right. So this is equivalent. And then E is neither. The last question works the same way. It's done as a fill-in-the-blank question because getting the format to match what on Canvas just was too complicated. So we've got 4 statements here, and you want to find out whether they are consistent. Different combinations of them are consistent. Remember, a set of statements is consistent if they can both be true. So, Q1, Gottlob Frege was the sole inventor of quantificational logic. You might not know who Gottlob Frege is. By the end of the term, you will know what quantificational logic is, because that's what we're studying in the second half of the term. In any case, Frege was one of 2 people who discovered it. But if he was the only person who discovered it, it would be compatible with saying that Bud Powell did not discover it. So A, consistent. But when you look at Q1 and Q2, those are not consistent. Either Frege discovered it on his own, or he discovered it at the same time as C.S. Peirce. So we're going to say B, inconsistent. For C, we've got 2 and 4. 2 and 4 are consistent. 1 and 3 are inconsistent. And 1, 2, and 4 are inconsistent. So there you go. Once you fill in all your answers, you should go back and look up and double check them. I'm not going to walk you through that, but it's good to do that. Be sure that everything's filled in. Be sure that you're confident in your answers. Hit submit. After you hit submit, it's going to say something like this, 10 out of 100 points. And you might think, my God, I did terrible. But that's because there's only one question on the test that was given to us that is gradable by Canvas. All the others I have to grade by hand. So your real grade won't appear until I go in and grade all the other questions by hand. Now, you may actually have more questions that are machine gradable or fewer questions that are machine gradable because the task that you are going to be given is randomly generated. So you may have noticed that the questions came in units on certain topics. Each of those is going to pull a question randomly from a pool of questions similar to that one. So for instance, with the argument, explanation, or neither thing, I have a pool of passages, 1/3 argument, 1/3 explanation, 1/3 neither, and the Canvas is going to pull a question randomly from that pool. Finally, I know a lot of people have unreliable internet. I know I do. And it may be that your internet will go out or some other problem will happen during the test. If that happens, don't panic. Just email me. We'll figure it out. Okay? I feel like there are a lot of fears around online testing, especially for people who are older. My children find it perfectly natural, but I don't want you to have to deal with that kind of stress. I'm making this I'm trying to make this as stress-free as possible. So if you have technical issues, just let me know. I can reset the test.